So in this session, I'm going to cover a few aspects of creating online group projects. Um, a lot of this will be kind of an interactive hands-on thing through the learning management system. I'll show you in Canvas how to create and manage and assign different tasks to groups within your courses. But first I'm going to talk more about the research and the best practices that are in the field regarding groups. And to prepare for this webinar, I read through a bit of literature, not just education literature, but also groups within the workforce and what works, but mostly focusing on education and higher education. And so I wanted to share some of those findings with you. And if you have a question at any time, go ahead and raise your hand within the GoToWebinar, and or you can chat in the box there. I can also unmute you if you want to have the microphone, and we can make this interactive, and feel free to chime in if you have feedback, if you have questions, comments, if you have any gossip that you want to share with the group, go ahead. And so I'm going to get started here. First of all, this represents every group in higher education. This is the enthusiasm that they have when they find out that they have a group assignment that's due in their class, and it also represents the enthusiastic nature when they complete the group assignment. Every individual involved is just thrilled to be a part of that, and ideally, but that never happens, I'm sure. If you've ever been a student in a group project, or if you've ever assigned a group project as an instructor, you know that this ideal is not reasonable, and we may never get it. Who knows? But we can get close to there. We can work on that. And I'm sure, starting out light, you may have seen this graph posted on the internet, on social media, what group projects are supposed to teach you, and it's a pie chart with portions of communication, responsibility, collaboration, teamwork, and then what group projects really teach you. A lot of it is just trust no one. And, facetious and everything, but and another perspective on group projects that you may have run into. I'm not sure if I hate group projects or just hate the people in my group. I mean, obviously, group work is important. It's important in academia. It's important in the workforce. It's important as students, as adults. But it can also breed feelings of discontent being part of the group. And we'll talk about those feelings and how we can work to combat that so that we don't have a meme based on our assignments that we give to students. So I wanted to talk about, you may have seen this headline, extra, social loafer was identified. And I think the social loafer might have been at the Chicago school or at another institution, but there was a social loafer somewhere, and that person was identified. And so what social loafer, another interchangeable term for social loafer, is a free rider. And the free rider problem actually stems from economics and has been espoused by the psychological community and field, but it's very interchangeable. And the free rider problem is, it aptly applies to academic group projects. And it's essentially an economic paradigm originally, which described individuals or groups that were benefiting from resources or services without paying for such, and the effects that that had on the economy. And examples I think of right away in terms of oil production in countries, Norway and Saudi Arabia, they have a big free rider problem with their economic system. Within academia, we have problems with social loafers. In a sense, the social loafer would be an underperforming group member who reaps the benefit of the accomplishments of the remaining group members while putting little or no effort himself or herself. And we know from, I think that most people here are psychologists. Looks like everybody here is from the Chicago school so far. The social loafing stems, some of the basic studies involve sitting people on rowing machines, and they'll put somebody on a rowing machine and measure the outputs of that individual, and then they'll put groups of people on a rowing machine, and they'll say that they're measuring the group output. In reality, they're also measuring each individual output, and they can see that when put in a group, then the output is less than when they feel like they're being assessed based on their individual performance. And we don't want that in academia. Another a parallel with the social loafer concept is the sucker effect. And I don't know if you've heard of the sucker effect, but it stems from this concept of the social loafer. It's essentially when good students don't want to be suckers and do all the work, and so they decide not to contribute to a task when they see others loafing or being social loafers. And sometimes they even choose to fail instead of carrying the load for everybody. And that's not what we want. That would be disastrous for the group, for the individuals, for the assignment, for the curriculum. Accreditors are not going to like that as well. So we need to get past this social loafer. And so I'm going to talk about some best practices for effective groups. And I'll mention that there is no one list of best practices for effective groups because it might depend on the institution, on your class size, on the class that you're teaching. There's no best practices that spans industry, for example, or even the working field versus higher education. But there are some general guidelines, and so every one of these points will have a sort of asterisk, I guess you can say. There are exceptions. We'll get started. For one, you need clear purpose and goals, and this should seem rather intuitive. But I'll add that in addition to a clear purpose and the goals, you should keep the scope of your project rather small and framed in such a way that it really demonstrates individual value. Obviously, we don't want to assign busy work, even for the sake of accomplishing some learning objective or learning outcome that's in the course. We always want to eschew busy work, but at the same time, we need to frame the assignments in the way that the individual is going to complete this task and is going to feel some kind of intrinsic motivation for one, but also that this will benefit me as a student in my profession, in my school, in my academic pursuit of scholarship, and in all aspects. I can see that completing this assignment is going to be meaningful for me. And this is especially true with group projects because students come into group projects with the perception that it's going to be busy work and it's not going to be productive for them. And so a lot depends on how we frame and structure the goals for the course. Manageable size, from what I read, some people said from 3 to 12 people would be a manageable size, and that really depends. I think for the purpose of our institution and our school and classes, a good thing to shoot for would be about 3 or 4 people. Maybe 5 if you have a class of 20 and you want to break it up into groups of 4, then 5 would also be good. But what you want is individual accountability for each student, but also you don't want it to be too large that the social interactions are lost or that it's overwhelming for the students. And so based on the research that I read, about 3 to 4 people would be what you want to go for. Operating guidelines. So some ideas that I came across or that other professors have shared are to have the team draft a charter once they form, and or you could provide them a charter, but it might be a good activity when they start to actually draft that charter themselves, and that they would delineate the roles, the responsibilities of their teammates. They might even draft, or you could encourage them to draft, a group contract, which is them signing it, meaning that they would be accountable for communication, for timelines, for deliverables. You might also consider either assigning a team leader or suggesting that the group assigns a team leader as well, and then delineates requirements for participation and such. And some of this could come from you, but you can also encourage the students to draft this themselves and then submit that draft for you. Now, communication is important. Within Canvas, students can subscribe for notifications, for example, for discussion posts and for correspondence. Now, it strongly suggests that you you all but force the students to subscribe to all the communications. They should be getting every communication from you, for one, and also from their students and from their groups. And so put that burden on them, that's something that they really need to be receiving, that communication. Even if it means in Canvas you can register a cell phone number and receive text messages, or you can register alternate email addresses in addition to the default institutional email address. You can put your Google, your personal Yahoo, or AOL, whatever it is, and you can decide which notifications go to which email or text. And then the types of assignments, this is important. This kind of relates back to what I was mentioning about clear purpose and goals. And that, and really this is a quote from another professor, too often we give students an activity and we call it group work, when in reality it's something they could do on their own. And then we get frustrated when they don't work together and just do the work on their own. And so, you know, it's a good point that group assignments are a different caliber than individual assignments, and we can't just rebrand something or rename an assignment and say this is a group assignment, so go do this as a group, when in reality it's really an assignment that 5 individuals could make. And so you have to consider that. That's important. That's why I put that asterisk right there. Establish a way of recognizing individual effort, and this may be through progress checks throughout the scope of the project. It might be through peer review assignments, which I think very fondly of, and it might be through some other metric that you determine, but individuals need to be accountable for the individual effort that they do. One assignment that I do for a class is I have students do annotated bibliographies, and they submit it as one paper. Essentially, every deliverable is one paper that they submit, but they rotate responsibilities. One student will be responsible for locating an article, for example, and then they alternate their responsibilities. And I do it through a wiki format that I can see their contributions, and I also set up a discussion for them, which I'll show you how to do in a little bit. But I'm able to see and chart and ultimately evaluate and assess their individual performance within the team. And that's important. You got to solve this problem of the social loafer, and one way to do that is make sure that they're all accountable and that the communication is good, which leads me to incentives and penalties. And I have no real original thoughts or guidelines. It really depends on the project and the course, but obviously incentives in a classroom setting will be a grade assignment, and penalty might be the same thing. Deduction of points or earning points, perhaps extra credit, I don't know. You can decide that, but they need to be held accountable by some way, and so you can determine that. Another thing, as I was doing the research, that's interesting is to consider semester or semester-long teams or term-long teams, depending on which modality you're teaching, and that it really allows students the opportunity to get to know each other, to correspond with each other, and have a cohesiveness as a team. I don't always do this. Sometimes I have, for example, in one class I have a midterm assignment that the team gets together. They know about week 2, who their teammates are, and they have to schedule a time during week 3 to meet together and give presentations, and it's a long synchronous session, and they give feedback in real time, and they write reports on that. But it's really just that 1 week where they're meeting. In weeks 2 and 3, they have to get together and decide when are they going to meet synchronously, which sometimes is a problem because I've had students from various countries, from the Eastern and Western hemispheres, North and South hemispheres, from Australia to Ireland and South Africa. And so it can be onerous for them. It can be quite challenging for them to find a synchronous time to meet, given that they might be all over the world. But I put a lot of emphasis on the asynchronous components of group projects, meaning synchronous would be, for those who are attending this webinar right now, we are communicating synchronously. You're hearing me in real time, and it's just the same as if we were on a phone call or if we were in the same room and talking face to face, as opposed to asynchronous would be something like a discussion board where not everybody is on at the same time, but they're contributing when they can, perhaps at different times. A library would be another example of an asynchronous medium, in that you pull a book off the shelf and that book was written many years ago or perhaps months ago, and you're just now reading it, but the information is the same, but the time is not. And so there are benefits to having projects throughout the semester, in that the cohesiveness of the group, and they can really get to know each other. And so that brings me back to the interim feedback and the progress reports. If you have a semester-long team that you formed, or groups, then you want to check in with them regularly, have them submit deliverables, and these might be low stakes. They might just be checking in. You might just check off, yes, you did submit that. It might not be for any points, or it might be points that they might have to submit things throughout the semester, and at the end they submit some sort of capstone deliverable. Excuse me. One thing I wanted to mention, just backing up, I forgot to mention on the semester-long projects, it's also a good opportunity if you assign the teams in week 1 or 2, for example, you might have time to do some icebreaker activities, for example. Let them get to know each other, have some activities, and again, reiterating those low-stakes deliverables. Maybe they need to fill out some report or form or charter and give it to you, or they might fill out a piece of paper that's interesting facts about themselves. It might not be related to the class or the assignments, but it's a way for them to have that icebreaker and get to know each other. And one thing I didn't put up here because the slide is already too cluttered, but I wanted to talk about collaborative tools. And there exists a myriad of technology out there to really help us with our group projects. We all have GoToMeeting, we have the Canvas LMS, many people have Skype. Within Canvas, there's a tab called Pages that I don't know if you utilize that, but it's a sort of wiki, or it could be used as a wiki. If you have students edit the pages, they can collaboratively work together. We also have discussions in Canvas. There are tools like VoiceThread. If you haven't looked into VoiceThread, you might consider that, or Google Docs. But I'll also emphasize to not overuse the synchronous tools. GoToMeeting is a great tool. GoToWebinar that we're on right now serve great purposes, and I think they're fantastic. But don't expect that they're going to be using that all the time. But really emphasize those asynchronous tools, the Google Docs, maybe VoiceThread, Canvas tools that you'd have there. So moving on we talked about some best practices for teams, assigning teams. There's actually been research, not so much empirical research, but a lot of case studies and a lot of faculty input on how to effectively assign a team, which you might not even think much about. But the ideal is that the team members should be selected by the professor. And some of the ways that a professor could select teams is, and I'll jump down to the third bullet point, this benefit of multiple perspectives. Try and diversify the groups if you can. Get groups that you believe will be able to get the work done together, but consider diversifying, because the multiple perspectives really adds to a constructivist viewpoint of the curriculum. And some of the multiple perspectives might include balancing out the genders or the nationalities. You might consider the career backgrounds. When I teach in IO, I often have students from all kinds of careers, really. I have police officers, I have social workers, I have HR business people, I have students who are just out of undergrad and went straight into a graduate program without career experience. And I have people who finished a career and are starting something new, and that's why they're in school. And I have young people, old people, so you might balance out age. You could even look into the GPA. In ePortal, you have access to student GPAs, and it might not be a good idea if you have two groups that half of the students have 4.0s and they're in one group, and half of the students have 2.0s and they're in one group. That might not be the greatest idea. and also consider time zones. And as part of my icebreaker introduction discussion every term, I ask people where they're from, tell us about yourself, what time zone are you in? And it might be better, depending on the nature of the group, to pair people by the time zones. West Coast people versus East Coast people, for example, especially if you're planning that there will be some synchronous elements in the group, then you don't want to stagger the time zones if you can. You might also look into Canvas. You can access, when you click on people, you can access how much time students have spent in the LMS. And you can also see which pages they've visited and how much time they've been on those pages. And so some students log in early during the semester and they log in often and they spend a lot of time, and other students, maybe they don't log in very much. And so you want to be mindful of that. And I would suggest staggering the amount of time that they log in, which the time that it's not a conclusive statistic, I'll admit, that just because somebody logged in and then maybe walked away and made a sandwich and they're still logged in, that doesn't mean that they're actively involved in the course, but it's something to consider. And it's really mixing up the students fosters opportunities for creativity and also constructivism, like I mentioned. The second point, I have it in X's and red. So groups of friends. I did read that some professors, they like to have people self-select into groups, and for every professor who says that, there's probably a handful that say this is a very bad idea. And especially you don't want friends selecting groups by themselves. One thing that you could do, I'll mention as an aside, in Canvas you can create a group that's, for example, a study group. That maybe this group isn't accountable for performing according to the metrics of the course, they won't be graded, but maybe they would appreciate study groups, and you can organize that within Canvas, and then they can self-select. They can enter a group or leave a group. They can change from one to the other. They would only be able to be a member of one group at a time, but that's an option. But if there are high stakes, if this is an actual assignment, then the best practices are that the professor should really make the selections for assigning the groups. Even if the professor just does it randomly, then that seems to be better in general than people pairing up with their friends. And you also don't want to be the last person picked, somebody who's an orphan and not part of a group, and then the professor has to manually put that person in. You want to avoid that situation if possible. And then another thing is the benefits of peer review. There's quite a bit of research out there saying that when students assess each other, those assessments, for the most part, are pretty reliable, even compared to the assessments that a professor might assign to an individual student. And so you might consider utilizing peer review a little bit more, and I'll show you how to do that in Canvas. It's a pretty sophisticated function, I think, with statistical reliability generally, and it also holds people accountable. It knows that I'm going to be judged by my participation in this team, and you can assign the peer reviews to be anonymous, that your teammates, you don't know who, but somebody will assess you, and so it keeps them accountable. And it also gives them purpose as an evaluator, as an assessor. It gives trust, or it instills trust in them and confidence from the professor. And who knows, maybe some of these students will go on to teach as well. And so I think it's always good to have that practice, that that confidence that they can participate in academia in that function. So I'm a big proponent of peer review. And so I just wanted to talk through kind of an example of, what is a group project? What is group work? What does it mean? And my example would be a class discussion, which we pretty much, I'm assuming that we all have class discussions, especially if you're online. The instructions are typically such as this: read articles X and Y, write a post, respond to 3 other students, and repeat that 7 times or 14 times, depending on the course. Some courses I have a discussion every single week, or maybe even 2 in 1 week. And some courses I have 3 in the whole term. It really just depends. But you can actually shake up the typical discussion paradigm and make it a group assignment. And so some of my ideas down here would be you can assign groups within Canvas, and then if you have a discussion, even if it's just this, read articles X, Y, write a post, and respond to other students, you can have groups of students discuss this instead of just a communal class discussion that we're typically used to. You can have 3 different groups, and each group will have these instructions, and they'll participate on their own discussion, which that more intimate setting would induce greater levels of accountability because they have to respond. There's only maybe 2 or 3 or 4 other students that they have an option to respond to, instead of, I've had classes of 20 students, so there's 19 other students if I'm in that class, and I might not even read 15 of those posts. I might just find 3 or 4 and stick to that and dive into that. And so there can be some benefit to having group discussions like that. Another thing that you might consider is having the class discussion, but if you have groups, you can have a team member who posts consensus posting, meaning that one person will be the dedicated poster for the group. And so there might be 4 groups, and so there might just be 4 people talking in the discussion, but each group decides what that person will say. And I'll mention that this will take a lot more time. My typical discussion, I expect an initial post by Wednesday. I want them to respond to other people by Friday, 2 or 3 other people by Friday, and then follow up over the weekend and curate their own initial post. And so the whole span is about a week. And in reality, students don't really start it usually until Wednesday, and they go through Sunday. And after Sunday, it becomes a ghost town. If you're to do something big like this, having group members, like if these 4 students were part of the group and they're drafting one post, you're going to need a lot more time than that. You can't just pull that off probably within 1 week. You might want to extend the discussion for 2 weeks, have a 2-week discussion, or 3 weeks even. Or even, I mean, I've been to conferences where people say they had long-running entire semester discussions, which you might consider trying, and that might be a good forum for some kind of team consensus posting. Another idea that I've come across is rotating leadership teams, and I've never done this, but I've always thought that would be fascinating. Instead of the instructor being some sort of sage on the stage, which typically we don't want to be, not in higher education, the way that our programs are set up, but assign students to be leaders of particular discussions, and that might even be a group. You might have 4 groups in your class, and you'll have 4 discussions, and each group takes a turn leading that discussion, and then your role would be as the guide on the side, interjecting. And as a side note, I'll mention just best practices in discussions in general. If you're a professor and you expect that the students are in the discussion every day during the week and that they're contributing meaningfully, then that means the expectation of the teacher is that you are in the discussion every day and that you are contributing meaningfully. You can't dock students for not posting Thursday, Friday, or Saturday and putting everything on Sunday if you were nowhere to be found until Sunday evening as well. And also there's you don't have to write a big paragraph or a tome for every post that you do. I know our guidelines are typically you should do 150% of the enrollment. So if there's 10 students, you should be in there 15 times, a minimum. I like to be in there much more. My goal is usually, if there's 10 students, I want to be in there 25 or 30 times, but that doesn't mean that I'm posting big paragraphs or correct. You don't want to be invasive like that. You want to contribute free thinking. But on the other end of that aspect, there might be a temptation to just post, there's a discussion, it's going well, and you might come in and say, good job, Susan, or good job, Sally, and then duck out like you're saying some good things there. That doesn't really help much. It does tell them that they're on the right track, but you want to be a little more specific. You might say, this is a good post or a good thread because you're hitting on these points, and I think that that's very insightful, or I appreciate that, or whatever. And so that's my end of my side note right there. And back to the rotating leadership teams. I think that it is a good idea to give students active leadership roles in the discussions, that they're not just there to for the perfunctory reasons of writing a post, responding to 3 other students, and then curating their own initial thread and responding to those. And they're just going down the checklist, and yes, I did that and that and that, and they've already posted to 3 other students, so I'm not going to post to a 4th because I don't need to. Giving students an active leadership role might change that paradigm a little bit, and that would be useful for them. And so my summary, I'm going to read this one quote again because I think it's pretty brilliant. Too often we give students an activity and call it group work when in reality it's something that they could do on their own. Then we get frustrated when they don't work together and they just do their work on their own. And so really framing the projects that it's meaningful at the individual level, and considering that a group project is a group project, an individual project is an individual project, and not to mix your shampoo and conditioner. Try and have them in different bottles. And also you want to really foster multiple perspectives. They need to be able to connect with the community. And I completely even forgot, I know I'm giving my summary, but I put an elephant on this page. You probably are wondering let's go deal with that elephant there. But that whole aspect of benefits and multiple perspectives is, and I'm sure you've heard this in team building activities or whatever, but you blindfold people, put them in a room with an elephant. One person will feel the tusk and think that it's the object is a weapon. The other will feel the trunk and think maybe it's a rope. Somebody will push on the side and think it's a wall. Everybody has these different perspectives, but it's when they come together and they can determine, okay, this thing has 4 legs and a trunk and tusk and floppy ears, and it's very large, and so they can paint a better picture of the elephants as opposed to just themselves individually. And so that was my point about that. And then, group projects are a great way for students to come together and analyze case studies, current events, research, but the key is that it should really be applied personally, and it should be meaningful for them, because that's the way that they're going to retain the information, and that's what's going to provide value. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm diving into Canvas now. I'm going to show you a few tricks on how to create groups within Canvas and what that looks like from our end, what we can do, and also I'm going to show you what the students see and how they interact when they're part of a group. By raise of hand here in the webinar, go ahead and press that hand button. Have you worked with groups? Have any of you actually done work with groups in Canvas and used the group set feature? I'm seeing no hands as of yet. If not, then don't worry. You'll have something that you're going to learn right now. So this is a dummy Canvas course with dummy students because they're not very smart. No, it's because they're just fillers that we put into the course for the example. On the people's page right here, you click on this. You have a list of your roster. I always created a group. I'm going to start with a blank slate right here. So I'm on the People's tab. I see the list of all the people, and I can see the Groups tab. The group has nothing. There are no student groups, and so I want to create a group. And this could be, ideally it would be the name of the assignment. So it could be a midterm group, or it can be a capstone, and if they're all working together to do some sort of capstone, or it could be some kind of experimental group. I'll just go with capstone. I think that's a good thing. So I'm going create group set. It's called capstone. You can allow self sign up. Again, I would leave this unchecked. I think that self sign up is not a good option typically. And you can scroll over here. It's this is just telling you that groups can, if you check this, groups can opt in or opt out of whichever, and students can opt in and out of groups. And you can require groups to be in the same section. I would just leave that unchecked. And the 2 options are, you can create the groups manually, and I'll show you how to do, or you can split the students into equal groups. So I have 6 students in my course. I'm going to split that into 2 different groups. Have 3 students in each one. For leadership, like I talked about, having a group leader, you can automatically assign a student as a group leader. That can be a random student, or it can just be the first student to join as a group leader, which doesn't make sense if I'm splitting it up. whatever. Or you can go back afterwards and select a group leader. So I'll leave this checked for now. I'll create a couple groups to show you what this is like. So Canvas is going to organize 2 groups for me. Canvas is going to assign a group leader for me. Oops. And I'll go ahead and save that. And now we have people, and we have the name of a group. It's called Capstone. And I can expand this, and I can see the students are in the group. Now, just because Canvas assigned these groups, that doesn't mean that they're permanent. I can move these around. I can move this student down here. I can move this student up there. By default, Canvas decided that Mark Lavitt would be the group leader, and that this dummy student would be the group leader over here. But I can change that. I can say, you know, this student's going to be group leader, and I want this student as group leader. And so you can determine that. Now, by default, the group set is called Capstone, and the groups are Capstone 1 and Capstone 2. But you can change the name of that. That could be East Coast versus West Coast. It could be Team Do, Team Ray, Team Fa. Let's see. Capstone 2, that would be East Coast and West Coast right there. And so again, I can move students from one to the other. Let me go ahead and grade. So this was one that Canvas split them automatically. Canvas assigned the group leaders, although I did shuffle them around and reassign the group leaders. Let's create another group, and this one will be called, I'll just say midterm. This one I'm going to create the groups manually, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. All right, so there are no groups. There's a group set. I just need to create the groups. So let me go with the other. So I was just going to do West Coast is one group, and East Coast is another, and I'll keep it at those 2. I'll expand this, and then I can just drag and drop students into one or the other. All right, and I can assign my group leaders if you want. If you don't want a group leader, then you don't have to have a group leader. They could nominate their own group leaders if you want them to, or you can just assign it themselves. So now I have 2 groups, or 2 group sets. One is a Capstone group here where Canvas automatically sorted them and assigned a leader, and the other one I dragged and dropped, and I did that myself. So each group has a group page. For the sake of simplicity, let's see. No, I'll keep these good for here now. You can see this option, Visit Group Homepage. Each of these groups, the icon on the right, says I can visit those group homepages. So this is Group East Coast for the midterm. Mark, Sean, and a dummy student. I'm going to visit their page. This looks a lot like Canvas, but this isn't the Canvas course. This isn't POC 2016. This is the POC 2016 East Coast group page, where they have announcements that they can post, or you can post. They have pages. Pages would be like a wiki thing where they can contribute, and they have a blank slate, and they can edit a page of sorts. With the people, you can see here are all the peoples. The people who are part of the group. Discussions, you can create a discussion and push it out here, or they can also create their own discussion, and this is something that only their group can see. All of these pages, only their group can see. The other group cannot access their discussions. In fact, I'll just put something here, you know, discussion 1, and let me find some text there. Thread replies, save and publish. All right, so there's a discussion for them. I'm the one that created that, but students can also create their own discussions. So I go back to the discussion page, and I can see that right there. It looks just like regular Canvas does. They also have a file repository. By default, they have 52.4 megabytes, and if you need your groups to have more than that, then contact your department manager, and they'll get in touch with the Canvas coordinators. But students can upload files. They can sort by folders. They can upload zips and what is it called? Expand the zips or extrapolate the zip files. And so that's a good way for them to pass files, so they don't have to be constantly emailing Because if I email my other 3 people a document and each one's doing work and they each save it as something different and then they email it to everybody else, then in no time that can get pretty complicated. They have a conferences feature, which I won't cover but in this session, but if you know about the conferences tool, then they have their own conference abilities there. And then they also have collaborations, which would be like a Google Doc that they can, and they'd have to link their Google Drive, and so that they can work on a paper at the same time. And so this is what the East Coast looks like. I can jump from the East Coast page to the West Coast page. As the professor, I can do that, so I can see that's what those students are doing. Now, what are these students up to? And I can go into the discussion and see their discussion, and I can see their pages and collaborations. I can see what files they're uploading, so I can keep tabs on them in that aspect. And so let me go back to the main course. Now what I want to do is I'm going to pull up a student. This is one of our dummy students, and he was just put into that group. In fact, he's in 2 groups. So this is what the student dashboard looks like. It's very similar to yours, except for this student has a to-do list of assignments that he needs to complete, and your to-do list is assignments that you need to grade. But as the student clicks on courses, oh, why isn't it showing courses? Huh, it should show the group right there. Oh, here's my group. So you can see that this student is in West Coast for both. Those are 2 different groups, and that you wouldn't want to call the groups the same thing. If you might not want to have more than one group in one course anyway. Is this the group that I created the discussion for? It is not. So let me go ahead. That's West Coast right there. I'm going to hop back over to West Coast POC right before I do that. Let me hop over. Since I named 2 things West Coast, it might have been. No, but let me just go back to the student view. So I'm a student right now, one of the students in the group. You can see what I can do. I can create my own discussion, and I can put in that information, thread replies, browser. So it's as if I'm a teacher. This is kind of the teacher view, and I can save that, and I can create it. I can facilitate that discussion for my group. If I go back out to discussions, you can see there's my discussion. I can create an announcement as a student, and so my announcement might say I'm offline this Thursday or something, and I can save that. And then the instructor can also push out announcements to the groups, and so they can see each other's announcements and such. And I can upload a file. Just pick a random file, I don't know. Upload that and share that with my students. So when I click on courses, now I thought that that the groups would appear here, but when I click on all courses, I can see my courses, and then I can see my groups, and I can see which course that group is associated with. So that's what the student view looks like. If you have any questions, go ahead and raise your hand in the GoToWebinar. At this point, I'm going to head back out to my Canvas course. I'm a professor again. I want to now create an assignment that's a group assignment. So here's a list of all of my assignments. I'm going to create a new one, and this one is called Group Assignment. And if you're creating this could be for points, or it could be not for points. You can say this is nothing, it's just a deliverable. In fact, I could say this is worth 0, and it's either a complete or an incomplete. So they check if they've done it, and don't check if they didn't do it. It can, online submission or whichever. And then I'll say that this is a group assignment. Here's the group assignment tab. I can assign grades to each student individually. For example, if it's a discussion, this one isn't a discussion because it's an assignment. And so maybe I just want, I want them to submit it, and I'll give them an overall grade, because that's how life works. That's how group works. If my project wasn't a success, then they're not going to say, well, you tried hard and you did well, so we'll give you a bonus anyway. And then I can choose the group set. Maybe I'll choose this is for the midterm group set that I assigned. Peer reviews, I won't go over that right yet, but I do want to show that to you. And I'll go ahead and load that. And then you can see the assignments. And goodness, I don't even remember which what I named that. Let me just back up a thing. Group assignment. Group, where are you? Group assignment, right here. All right, so there's my assignment out of 0. When I go over to the grades and assign some grades, then let me look again for the group assignment. Why isn't it showing? Group assignment. Okay, here's the group assignment, and it's not a point thing. It's just check or uncheck. If they did it, they get a check. I don't know why this is looking strange. Let me hop over to SpeedGrader real quick. All right, so I have 2 groups. I have West Coast and East Coast, and ideally they would have submitted something. So I'm reviewing a paper or a file or a video, and so I can mark this as complete and give them my feedback, send the comment to the group, and submit that. And then this next group, I can mark that perhaps as incomplete, and I'll submit that. And then I'll hop back over to the gradebook. Let me refresh the page there. And what? I don't know, I'm seeing a bug here, but ideally this would show as a check mark or unchecked in the gradebook. There's some kind of bug going on today, but that's how that would work. So you can assign, what's this grades? I don't know what's going on. Maybe this course is closed because it's a dummy course. Maybe the calendar doesn't let me submit grades after the course is officially closed, so I should have checked that before I came in here. But let me just show you real quick. I'm going to go back to that group assignment, and we're going to do some peer review assessments here. So I'm going to go back to edit the assignment, and I'm going to select peer review, and there are 2 different options. How am I going to assign them? Do I want to manually assign the peer reviews or have it be done automatically? And do I want them to be done anonymously so that a student gets feedback from a peer but doesn't know who that feedback is from? So I'm going to go ahead and select manually. So I want peer reviews, and I want it to be done manually. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that. So I'm on the page. I'm going to click this peer review button right here. And then I have a list of all the students here, and so I have, for example, Mark Labbit would be a student. I want Mark Labbit to assess one of the other students, so it could be John. So I'm going to add him. I'm going to have this student assess. Of course, he can't assess himself, but I'll have him assess Mark Labbit. So I can do this manually, like I'm doing now. Or I can have Canvas automatically assign peer reviews if I want. Then I just click that. Or I can just do this automatically. Now the little exclamation points, this caution sign means that the person hasn't done their peer review yet. And so I can click this green arrow thing here, and that would remind him to complete that assessment. Or if I click the trash can, then that means I'm no longer assigning him to that. And so I can assign him to somebody else. And so that's how the peer review assignments work. And so the last thing I will show you, since we're wrapping up let me create a discussion, and this will be called group discussion, and I'll remember this time that it's called group discussion. Put in my boilerplate text, allow things, graded, and then I'll put this is a group discussion. Now typically, chances are that when you create the discussion, you just skip over this part right here, but in this case, I'm going to assign it to the capstone group. And so I'll go ahead and save and publish. And then you see the group discussion page. It looks different than usual. There's this blue text up front here, up top here, and it says this is a graded discussion. I didn't put any points. I should have put points. Since this is a group discussion, each group has its own conversation for this topic, and here are the ones you have access to, which means these are the different groups. So I'm going to go ahead and open the different groups. Here's the East Coast, and East Coast is seeing the same discussion instructions here, but they don't reply on this page right there. They apply within their own group, and so this is where they would put their own replies, and they can't see the other group discussions. And so I'd post the reply there, but only, in this case, only East Coast can see that. The West Coast cannot see that. Oh, what did that do? Yeah, let me go back here. I'm going to open the West Coast window now. So that same discussion, you can see I replied on the other thread, but I didn't reply on this one. And the ramifications are that as an instructor, this might take a little more work because you're going to have to check into to maybe three. If you have 3 different groups, you're going to have 3 different discussions, but they'll be much smaller, much more manageable, and you're going to get a lot better threading than you do with a big class discussion. If you have 20 students, then chances are one student is not corresponding with each of the 19 other students. But if you have a small one like this, then one student is probably corresponding with the other 4. And so it gets to a more intimate setting. But the disadvantage from that would be that there might be some perspectives from groups Doe and Ray that Team Me isn't considering just because they don't have that access to the people as they're discussing. So let me hop back out to the gradebook, although I'm skeptical because the gradebook is, and I'm pretty sure that's the problem, is that I think officially this course has ended, unfortunately. So here's that group discussion. Oh wait, I didn't mean to go to that. I meant to go to SpeedGrader. My apologies. Group discussion. I'm going to open up SpeedGrader over here, and you can see each of the students, they get their own individual grades. And so I can see the origin, this person, that looks like me, but we'll say, okay, here are the different students. This person submitted these posts, and I can jump to that particular discussion and see that one. So you don't grade discussions as groups, but you can grade assignments as groups. Groups can receive collaborative grades, but for discussions, for obvious reasons, you would grade each one individually. And so you'd grade it like that. Are there any questions or anything you wanted me to cover regarding groups, regarding peer assessments, how you might do this in Canvas? You can go ahead and raise your hand, and I can take you off of mute if you would like. If not, then I hope that this gave you a lot of good perspective on groups, some best practices, some not so good practices, some functionality within Canvas. Don't be afraid of this group function. I've had groups in my classes, and the students think that when done correctly, the groups are a great experience. It's a good way for them to really be creative and apply that multiple perspectives, constructivist theory in a very intimate setting with a few of their classmates. It can be really beneficial. So anyway, I will let you go, and thank you for attending, all of you. Go ahead and reach out to me if you have questions after this email or after this